From Daylight Interactive, this is Stories for You. I'm your host, Kazuki Akiba. This is a show where I talk with different individuals ranging from artists to entrepreneurs about their journey of where they began, where they went, and where they are now. In the previous episode, I've talked about why I launched my media business, but most importantly, this podcast. While I try to accomplish and bring something new in my 9-to-5 role, I'm also trying to achieve growth in my passion. Trying to add something new and exciting to a space flooded with new voices every day can be a major challenge. Sometimes it seems like there's not enough time in a day to produce quality content that I can be satisfied with, and many of you probably go through the same as well. And that's why I'm excited about this conversation today. I'm pleased to introduce Cheryl Davis. She's an award-winning writer and practicing attorney at the Authors Guild. She received a Daytime Emmy Award nomination for her work on the daytime dramatic serial As the World Turns. She, like me, worked in a corporate during the daytime, but tried to work on passion projects on the side. For her, it's writing for theater and television. And I can't wait to hear more about it. Obviously, just a Tesco and some of the other places that I remember.
Marks and Sparks, yeah.
Right. Even though you see the price, it's £3, and when you're traveling, it's not a big deal. But then you realize as it adds up, it's wait a second, these are $7 for a microwavable food.
Yeah, you have to try to mentally convert it. Okay, so how much is this? And I remember the first time I went to London and I traveled was with my folks when I was about 15, 16. And my mother's ongoing mantra was, Billy, how much is this in real money?
I met Cheryl at a film event through a nonprofit organization, Asian American Film Lab. She was just starting on a project with them while I was helping out with their film competition. During this time, I was in the middle of many things, including starting my own business, Daylight Interactive, the company producing this very podcast that you're listening to right now. So we got to know each other a bit through these interactions, but we never really talked about her experience of becoming a lawyer to now TV writer and playwright. Never that is, until a few weeks ago when I sat down with her in an office in New York, where I used this podcast as an excuse to get to know her from her humble beginnings of what fueled her passion for writing.
Theater, I loved theater. I remember being a kid in elementary school and seeing a play and just being so fascinated by it, to the point where there's a girl who played a character of a Daisy in a play, and I saw her walking through the halls the next day, and I went, "Hi, Daisy!" And she looked at me like I was crazy because that really wasn't her name. But I was totally seduced and activated into the world of theater at an early age. I used to go during the summers to Scarsdale Day Camp. There was a lady from our church would drive a group of us to the Scarsdale Summer Day Camp, and I had such fun there. And then one summer they decided they were doing a musical, and I got swept into that. And then it was kind of I never looked back. I just adored doing musicals. They had something called Scarsdale Summer Music Theater that I spent, I don't know how many, 5, 6 summers, just going there and being in the musicals and performing. I love to dance. I love to sing. I even painted little portions of the set. I was not world's most handiest person. If you pointed at me with a hammer and a nail and said, "Hammer here," I could do that. But pretty much they just trusted me with a paintbrush occasionally.
Through her time at Scarsdale Summer Camp, she wanted to pursue acting and decided to attend Princeton University. There, she continued her love for the arts, doing choreography and auditioning for plays, but when she wasn't getting cast in the parts she wanted, something didn't click with her. Then she decided to take the matter in her own hands by writing the roles for herself.
Started writing all of these shows with roles for myself, and then I found myself being more intrigued with the other characters and their storylines, and my roles became more like the sideline. And I said, you know what, I actually like writing, as I felt like I'm much more versatile as a writer than I am as an actress. I realized that what I really wanted to play were the funny best friend roles. I never wanted to play the great dramas or anything like that. And I said, well, if I don't want to play those kind of things, but I want to write those kind of things, let me just go write those kinds of things. So I found myself writing. I wrote and started writing lyrics for songs that I certainly couldn't sing. I wrote roles that I couldn't play, and I said, you know what? I like this. I enjoy this.
For you as a writer, how do you work as an actor from that perspective, knowing that you've acted before?
Well, I try when I'm writing something, if I'm writing a long speech for an actor, a monologue, I try to make it make emotional sense. And when I'm writing through it, I do try to act it in my head. It's like, what would make sense for the character, for me as an actress to kind of, was the emotional arc or the through line of this? So I try to get into the heads of the characters, all the characters that I write. And I find it interesting, especially if I write a character whose point of view I may disagree with. I find myself then I really have to try to get into why would this person feel this way, and I'll find myself typing things that I disagree with, but I could feel like I know what's going on in that person's head, or at least I feel like I know what's going on in that person's head. So what is it saying? That everybody is the hero of their own story. Nobody is the bad guy in their mind, and you have to be able to portray characters as being the heroes of their own stories.
Right. And when like there's simple arguments, right? That's also a story right there. Like you hear both sides of the argument. It's kind of like they're portraying themselves as the good guy, and you could clearly hear that. And all right, so as a writer, you have to be that mediator, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of judge that between the two? So what is the real scenario here?
Now, that's what makes drama, I think. If you have equally strong opposing forces, that's going to create drama. If you have one character who's strong and the other character is saying, but you're just wrong, and you're creating these straw arguments, then the audience kind of sits back and say, well, this guy's obviously right. Why is this other person even objecting? Why am I sitting here? But if you have viewpoints that are equally strong, then I think you kind of wonder, like, hopefully in some of the stuff I write, hopefully people then start to think about, wow, maybe I should consider my points of view more deeply, or maybe the other side has some points that need to be made, need to be addressed, and addressed in a reasonable way, as opposed to saying, you're just wrong.
Kind of like the Saturday morning cartoon, right? It's like, ha ha, I'm the bad guy. I'm here to destroy the world.
I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids.
It's like, I'm going to steal all your candies, guys, kids. We're taking that. And then the good guys come in. It's like, oh, I'm the savior. I'm the hero here. I'm going to come in and save the day.
Yeah.
All right. Enough was the chit-chat on the writing process. So at the time she went to Princeton and graduated with an English degree, she had to pursue something that could sustain a living for her. So she decided to apply to a grad school that had a mix of her love of debate and 60 Minutes. She went to Columbia's Law and Journalism program. She learned to master both crafts, which led her to become a litigator.
So they do say a lawyer is a frustrated actor. I would modify it to say that a litigator is a frustrated actor, because litigators are the one who have to go into court and tell a story. And that's what I started to realize, is that as a litigator, a lot of it is telling a story. And your audience is other attorneys, your audience is a jury, your audience is a judge, but you always have to have a very clear story that you're trying to tell. And I realized that when I was in law school. But at that time, also, a lot of companies and media places weren't hiring lawyers directly out of law school. So I said, well, let me go to a law firm and see, kind of work my way into that kind of job. And I went to a law firm, and I stayed in the law firm life for a number of years after that.
Throughout that whole journey of changing like a couple of law firm and eventually becoming a partner, how did that make you mature as an individual? Like, what were the challenges that grew you as a person that made you who you are now?
Wow. Well, one thing, I stopped writing it when I first went to Weil, because I was so focused on being a junior associate, and I felt like I was working these usual junior associate insane hours. And at some point, I don't know what made me realize this, but I realized I missed writing. So then I wanted to get back into it, and by way of trying to get myself back into it, I took a class down at the New School. And I figured at the very least this will make me accountable. This will kind of force me. I will have to write some pages and hand them into people so that something will happen. And actually after law school, when I was writing at Princeton, I had all of these wonderful ideas for these massive epic plays, which I would always start and I was saying, oh, this is wonderful, this is such a cool idea. And then I would get to what I call the annoying middle sloggy part, where I'd actually have to write through the middle and write to the end. And I would get to that point and I would no longer have that first flash of inspiration, but by then I'd have had another inspiration. And I said, oh, this idea is even better. And I would keep shunting projects aside for ages. So it wasn't until after I got out of law school and I said, I am not going to start another play until I finish this one. And then I finished my very first full-length play called Ruling Passions about Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII because, as I said, I'm an Anglophile. I love English history and especially the English monarchical history, the Tudors and Stuarts, yay. So then I finished my very first full-length play. And after that, I've been able to take on projects and finish them. And still, history is still a big, abiding creative passion and love of mine. I still like writing about historically based topics. But the thing about being a lawyer and kind of having to get myself back into something that I loved and passionately loved was I felt like that I wasn't in school anymore. I wasn't accountable to anybody in those terms. So I had to get myself back to doing something that mattered to me.
She has a great law career and started to write again. But something was missing in her life, which was challenging herself to write something that mattered to her. From that moment, she decided to jump all in to finish her first feature-length play and present it to the public. It's a terrifying feeling for anyone.
When I finished the play, and a friend of mine arranged for a reading of it, which terrified me because I never had anything like that before. So he set up a reading, and I baked cookies because I felt like even if people don't like the play, they will like the cookies. So I did that. And as I said, it was about Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. And I told my parents I want them to come. And my parents are not theater people. So they said, but it's theater and we're not really that into it. And I said, I know it's theater and you're not really that into it, but you're my parents and I want you there. So I kind of played the filial card. And they came, and afterwards I went up to them and they said, we liked it. You made us think we weren't going to like it, but it's because it's theater and history, but we liked it. And my father really got into the character of Cardinal Wolsey. He said, my man Wolsey is smooth. So really the excitement of and approval of my parents made me think that, oh, well, this is something I feel I can continue with this. And I got very positive responses from people. It was incredible hearing my words read, and that really lit the fires that I want more of this.
And from there, tell me more about that journey to writing Emmy-nominated show.
I saw an ad actually for somebody who was looking for somebody to write lyrics for a musical that I think it was going to be a review. And they were technically calling it, Times Square is seen through the window booth of the Howard Johnsons at 46th and Broadway, which is, God, no longer there, so I feel very old. But so that's when I started writing lyrics for that particular show. The idea is that we were writing songs for characters who then Times Square would be singing. Then that got me into BMI, musical theater writing, which then got me into writing full-length musicals, and I won a Kleban award for my writing of the libretto for my musical about called Barnstormer about Bessie Coleman, the first black woman flyer. So that kind of is how my law career segued into my writing musicals. Let's see, how did I get into TV? I was writing I applied and became a member of the Women's Project Playwrights Lab, which was also a great experience for me. And met a now friend, Leslie Nipkow, who was a soap opera writer. And we did one of those, everybody writes a 10-minute piece, and Leslie wrote her 10-minute piece, and she invited her agent to attend. And I said, Leslie, I would love to write for soaps. And she said, you need to meet my agent. And her agent came and is now my agent, Ricky Olshan. And so through Ricky, and there was a program at Procter & Gamble back when Procter & Gamble was doing soaps, where they invited a few writers in, and I was lucky enough to be one of those writers invited in for a couple of days workshop on how to write for soaps. Because I took a class in soap writing. I took one from Jeffrey Sweet, who that's how I met Jeffrey, and we became friends. I consider him a writing mentor. Hey, Jeff. He taught a soap writing class that I took. Another friend and writing mentor, Susan Sojourner Collier. Hey, Sojo. I went up to her apartment to learn how to write for soaps, and I ended up working with Sojo on a web series and a web soap. And Sojo and I are still good friends and in touch, and we will work on something again. We're working on something else. And so through that, and I got an opportunity to write a spec script for, all my children at the time. And I wrote the spec script, and I got pleasant feedback and just didn't crack the nut. So, but I found myself thinking, I'm writing what I see. I'm writing things that, I've seen something like this happen before, so that means it must be good. And what I found really helpful about the soap workshop I was at Procter & Gamble was teaching with Susan Dansby was she said that essentially people are going to hire you to be the best you. Don't try to write what you've seen before because there are people who are already doing that. Write what you want to say. So then I felt like, oh, well, then that kind of like these kind of very mind opening for me. So I started that when I wrote the spec scripts for As the World Turns at that point, I went into my own head and I said, well, I think this would be interesting. I'd like to hear the character say this.
Casey, thank you so much for this beautiful breakfast.
No, thank you. You're not even letting me pay.
I do hope that you two could work things out together. You made an absolutely beautiful couple.
Grams, it's...
And when I looked at you, I watched you, I wondered if I wasn't looking to a great-great-grandchild.
And I wrote my way onto the soap at that point. And that's something, I got similar feedback on my very first pilot script that I wrote was an adaptation of a play of mine called Swimming Uptown about an educated and affluent African-American woman who has to take in her ghetto-raised niece when her sister gets put in jail. And I wrote a play about it. And it always struck me as this is a premise for a series. This is a premise for an ongoing conflict and intrigue and drama and hilarity and all those wonderful things. So I wrote a pilot script. And in my pilot, I fell back into the trap of saying, well, I've seen this before, so I'll just write that. That means it must be good. And I got called on it by people who read it and said, you know what? I've seen this before. Go back and write something new and something different. So I did. And after that, I've been using it as a writing sample, but I got into New York TV Festival with that script. And I have gotten notice from other writers and showrunners and people who expressed interest in reading more of my work based on that script. So I feel like I'm kind of doing pretty well. At least I'm trying to learn more to trust my own voice. That's pretty much the lesson I gather from that, is to trust my own voice and write the way I hear things happening as opposed to writing what I think people want to hear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a lot of us struggle with that type of confidence, right? And the whole validation, because I sometimes struggle with that quite a bit with my own work, and even what I'm doing sometimes be like, it's just like what people really want, but at the end of the day, it needs to be about what's inside your heart, right? About what you believe is correct.
It really does. And the way I hear people speaking, I remember hearing, I felt like sometimes I felt like, oh, I can't have characters speak the way I speak. Using my vocabulary and just strange words and stuff like that because nobody says that. But then I saw a play on Broadway and this woman used the word vacuole, which I'd only ever heard in biology class. Like, well, shoot, if people on Broadway can use words like vacuole, I can give my characters the vocabulary I want.
From there, she continued to balance her passion between her two careers symbiotically. She recently joined the Authors Guild, where she provides legal counsel for authors in the city, while, of course, writing new screenplays for TV and theater. She's worked on several more projects, including a pilot called Mirror Mirror. All of these was the same goal of creating diverse content.
What I found fascinating is the fact that we are now, it feels like there's a world in which not only do our stories need to be told, different stories need to be told, I feel like it's more welcoming for them to be told. For example, I wrote a pilot called Mirror Mirror, and one of the points of that pilot was to show gender discrimination and harassment in the workplace, and the lead character is an Asian American woman, and I feel like I can connect to that as a woman in the workplace, but also I'm not Asian American. I've definitely been a minority in the workplace, and I know that there are sometimes ways in which we are looked at differently, different expectations, different sorts of lovely and unique questions get asked of us in these environments. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of trying to put those to the fore, so people look at it and say like, oh, I didn't know that happened, or yep, of course that happened to me, and we're getting a lot of response like, oh my God, a lot of this has happened to me in my experience. And there are some people who go, well, but I haven't seen it. Well, now you have, and now you know it's there. So I feel like it's almost like not like I could go back to like before Shonda Rhimes, before characters like Olivia Pope, where would you consider Olivia Pope likable? Not necessarily. We consider her badass, seriously. But it was a lot of when I was growing up, female characters were kind of unidimensional, if that much. They were likable. If they weren't likable, there was kind of like the Madonna whore sort of thing. It was there. Well, a lot of female characters I saw growing up were not as full as the guys. And it was, when I started writing, I would write things and people would go, well, geez, she's not as likable as I would like. And I would even write things of her character as black. And I'd have somebody say, well, but why does the character have to be black? She doesn't sound black. And I just kept writing through that. And I feel like I want to tell more stories where people are exposed to people who are full characters. Like the black characters don't have to be, aren't like thugs or doctors. There is a world of people who are in between. And I love exposing stuff like that and just having people be as human as they are and as flawed as they are and as funny as they are and as bright and as, oh my God, I'm incredibly bright, but I just made that stupid mistake as they are. So I feel like I want to expose more of the cultural differences and wonder of real people. And that's what I try to do. I try to write characters that to me are real.
From all of her experiences, the age-old question I want to ask her was, what's the key to igniting our own path?
Try to figure out what it is that jazzes you, what it is that inspires you. And when I was in college, I directed a couple plays because I was a theater person. And I figured I haven't directed a play. Let me see what that's like. I choreographed some work because I was in a dance company. And again, I'm a theater person. So, well, let me do some choreography. And I did both of those activities and I did enjoy them. I thought they were fun. But I found that there were people out there who this was their passion. There are people who were passionate about choreography, people who were very much more passionate about directing than I was. So I said, you know what? I am going to do what jazzes me, because there are people out there who this other field jazzes them. So please, you do your best work in that area and I will do this in my area. It's not to say stay in your lane by any stretch, because there are people who are jazzed by sort of writing and directing, and it's like, you go, that's great for you. But I think it's to figure out what it is that fills your soul, what it is that you feel is like, what are the stories you want to tell and how do you want to tell them?
Thank you for listening to the episode with Emmy-nominated writer Cheryl Davis. If you want to learn more about Cheryl, please check out the website below. Also, if you're in New York, come and watch her new musical, Bridges, at the Amos Theater on November 15th and 16th. Coming up in the next episode of Stories for You, an entrepreneur who has set out to launch the largest chess education platform in the world.
I ended up registering for my very first tournament. It was at a local middle school, and I got there, and to my surprise, it was full of like 6 and 7-year-olds. But you know, I didn't pay any mind. I was like, you know what, this is an official tournament. You know, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna see what happens. I'm probably gonna, you know, beat all of them, but you know, whatever. It's okay. The parents won't be too mad, hopefully. And I got destroyed. I got absolutely destroyed by a bunch of 6 and 7-year-olds.
So these small kids just beat the crap out of you.
Yes, yes, they did. I think I only won like one game, and I was so demoralized after that. I was just like, wow, I thought I was like decently smart, but come on, this is like terrible.
That's next on Stories for You. This is a Daylight Interactive production. This show is hosted by me. This week's episode is produced by Ed Lee. Additional dialogue written by Raven and Tiffany Khuu. Edited by me. Sound mixed by Ray Lanuza and Brian Blum. Our theme song and music are composed by GrayLaptop. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and please leave us a review. It really helps, and tell your friends. For Pete's sake, if you like it, share it, and they'll like you more for telling them. Join us next time on Stories for You as we focus on exciting new voices.